It all began when I was 15. I had just lost a bunch of weight and was receiving a lot of attention from boys for the first time. I came from an abusive home, so to be completely honest, I loved all the positive attention I could get. It was not that long before I had my first real boyfriend, Doug. He was older, and I was pretty happy, for a little while. The relationship turned abusive. He would talk down to me, treat me like crap, hit me, and various other things. After 9 months of this, I finally called it off, which caused a huge fist fight in the morning. I was free of him, and eventually started dating a much more evil person. But this story isn't about him. Doug would contact me, often begging me to hang out with him, and even contacting my then boyfriend. This continued for years. Finally, he seemed to have a mental breakdown near the beginning of the year. Doug began blowing up my Facebook account. Every half hour I would have 50 new messages. Not even kidding. They ranged from him telling me that we were soulmates, he went to therapy about what he did to me, and it was because of me his life was now on track, to calling me a heartless bitch who deserved to die. I blocked his accounts, but he only made more. I told him that this was harassment, and he told me, "You care so much about animals, but you care nothing for people. I'm dying here because of you. I should sue you for neglect. You shouldn't have started something you couldn't finish." I told him I finished it 5 years ago. He then found me on every social media platform and started mass messaging me, including on open YouTube chats, and all I could do was block him. I ignored technology for a while, but I work online, so I ended up going to the police for a restraining order, due to the messages saying things like, "I'm going to find you. If I can't have you, no one can. You're a monster. You're gonna pay for what you're doing to me." And a lot of really personal stuff that I would rather not share. The police say they feared for my safety and were going to arrest him. That is when I was stopped from going home after intense questioning about our 5-year finished relationship. I did not talk to him in that time, and they told me that they spoke to Doug's brother. Doug had quit his job on a whim and told his family he was biking up to my area, about a 4 or 5 hour drive, to find me. I was placed in a shelter in a city, and it was weeks until they caught him, lost, with some love letters addressed to me that apparently ended in some variation of, "We needed to die together as soulmates." He posted bail pretty fast, and I know he still stalks me online because I always see his name on things, whether it's signing petitions or drilling my friends about me. I messaged a few friends a video explaining, and kind of mocking, the situation. He now has a video up about me on YouTube titled, "My Stalker Story," as was shown to me by my friend. I am happy to say that I have since dated a wonderful gentleman, and am very happy. But I am still terrified of him. I have nightmares of him finding me. My name is Lauren. I'm nearly 21 now, but when I was 18, I finally moved out of my parents' house to go to college, and I was so excited. I'm really close to my family, but I couldn't wait to get out of my small town and finally live in a bigger city. I had a friend there who was a junior at the university at the time. She was studying abroad for the year, and was lucky enough to sublet her room for a low price. The house was old, with peeling paint and dead grass. The only plant on the lot was an ancient oak tree towering over the small home. It wasn't great, but it was a great deal for a freshman. I had 4 roommates, all of them upperclassmen. 3 lived on the second floor, and 1 in the bonus room/attic. My room was on the first floor, facing the back of the property. It was only large enough for a queen bed and a dresser, but I didn't mind, as I was just happy to have a room separate from my sister. The other girls were really nice and laid back. I had no friends there, and they were really welcoming. They invited me to go to their parties and other fun events, introduced me to their friends, and bought me alcohol. They felt like the cool older sisters that I never had. It wasn't really my scene. I'm more of a quiet, avoid people at all costs introvert, but I told myself college was the place to change that. They decided to host a barbecue a few weeks into the semester. As the night progressed, the small party basically turned into a rave. More and more people arrived, most of them already blackout drunk. I had a few drinks, but definitely wasn't wasted. One of my roommates introduced me to her friend Ben, who, like me, was hanging on the outskirts of the crowd. He was cute, tall, lean, with brown eyes and dark hair, and definitely my type. He was on the quieter side, a little nerdy, but that didn't bother me. In fact, I liked that about him. Over the next few weeks, I saw him around campus a lot, at the library, coffee shop, and even in an antique store. He joked that it was a sign that we were meant to be, and laughed. Ben asked me if I wanted to go to a friend's party with him that weekend. He said he hated that scene, but it might be fun if I was there. I agreed. All week, I really looked forward to seeing him. He picked me up early, and we got food before the party. When we got to his friend's house, Ben was the perfect date. He understood my usual dislike for crowds of strange people, and made a special effort to make me feel comfortable. At first, it was a lot of fun. Later that night, one of Ben's extremely drunk friends decided he was okay to drive home, and Ben took off to stop him. It was taking a while, and a short, round-cheeked guy came to chat with me until he returned, noticing how awkward I was by myself. He introduced himself as Simon, a friend of Ben's. He seemed nice, so we talked and we drank. "You're too good for him, you know," the friend said, changing the subject of our light conversation. He eyed me seriously, as if he were sizing me up. "I'm sure that's not true." I forced a small laugh, but his expression told me he wasn't joking. I didn't understand. I felt an arm on my shoulder and Ben interrupted. "You guys talking about me?" He grinned. "Yes," I smiled, relaxing into him. "Good," Ben said, shooting a pointed look at the other boy. Simon's face reddened, and he scuttled quickly away. "What a creep," Ben muttered. "What do you mean?" I asked, watching the small, thin Simon where he stood in the corner. "Yeah, I didn't want to freak you out, but he's been staring at you all night. He hasn't taken his eyes off of you." It was weird, and definitely a little creepy, but I soon forgot about the incident. 20 minutes later, I started to feel sick. I cursed myself for drinking so much beer, which I knew usually made me nauseous. I didn't want Ben to see me throw up, and I made a quick excuse to go to the bathroom. The room was spinning, and I had to hold myself up on the wall. I found the bathroom, and within seconds I'm on the floor. My limbs are heavy, and I can't even pull myself up to sit. I'm paralyzed, face down on the gross linoleum. At this point, I'm freaking out and can't stop crying. I was way too fucked up for only a few beers. I hear knocking and a boy calling my name. "I know you're in there, Lauren." It felt far away, like a horrible dream. "Let me in." Even with the throbbing bass, I could tell it was Simon. "Lauren, let me in." He won't stop yelling and pounding on the door. It's so loud. I thought the door surely was going to split in half from the sheer force of it. "Leave me the fuck alone!" I wanted to scream, but it came out as a small whimper. I was never really religious, but I prayed that the door would hold against him. A moment later, I heard another shout, and then what sounded like a fight. "Lauren, it's Ben. He's gone now. Are you okay?" I still couldn't answer. My mind was so fuzzy, and everything was going dark. I can't remember what happened next. Even now I can't recall all the details. I woke up a few hours later. It was dark, and I had no idea where I was, but it felt like a bed. My head pounded, and I felt extremely hungover. I didn't move, partially from whatever the hell I had been slipped, and partially because I was petrified. A heavy weight was on my waist, and it took a minute for me to register that it was actually someone's arm. My heart was pounding, and I strained to hear anything else. When I finally managed to calm down, I heard a familiar whirring sound. My charging laptop. I gathered all my courage and reached slowly out to the left, hoping to feel the metal yank chain of my lamp. I did, and I lit the room. Ben was fast asleep in the office chair. Kate was passed out in bed beside me. She woke with the light. Kate said she was so glad I was okay. She said Ben had brought me home after fighting off Simon. He had wanted to take me to the hospital, but the roommates had convinced him not to, as I was underage and probably not in any real danger. Ben reluctantly agreed, but insisted to stay to make sure that I was okay. I still felt sick for the rest of the day, and Ben stayed to play nurse. The roommates jokingly called him the hero, my knight in shining armor. Ben smiled, surely accepting of the praise. Late that same night, however, Ben had to leave. He was a pizza delivery man and had to work the late shifts. Soon after he goes, I get a text from an unknown number telling me that they had a great time at the party and they liked the way my legs looked in my skirt. I asked who it was. "You know who this is." I quickly blocked the number and suspected Simon. I showed the other girls, and they told me to save the text just in case. Ben started coming over nearly every night, and soon became my first real boyfriend. It was definitely a new experience. I had never forgotten the incident, but after not seeing Simon, or going to any more parties, I relaxed a little. It helped having Ben, my hero, by my side. Everything was going pretty well. Ben agreed to take our relationship slow. After a month and a half of constant contact, however, I felt like I needed a little space. I decided to go home for the weekend, which was about 3 hours from school. Ben was a little upset that I wanted to leave, but said he understood. I didn't have a car, and my parents didn't want to drive 6 hours round trip, so I had to take the train. Ben drove me to the train station and kissed me goodbye. He had to go into work soon, and had to drop me off an hour early. Approximately 30 minutes before the train, my phone starts buzzing. Again, it was an unknown number. "That suitcase is too big for a weekend," the text read. "You're not trying to leave me, are you?" I searched the room hysterically. There, a wooden bench across the lobby, sat Simon. His buzzed blonde head was semi-covered in a hood, and he had no bags or a ticket. Our eyes locked immediately. All I could hear was my heart hammering against my rib cage. My stomach turned and I sat there, frozen. I finally willed myself to move and leapt from my seat, surprising the couple beside me. "Who the fuck do you think you are?" I shouted, suddenly so angry I couldn't control myself. Simon looked from side to side, as if he were waiting for one of the now staring passengers to intervene. As if on cue, a large man in an Amtrak uniform stopped me and warned me that if I didn't calm down, I was going to have to leave. I still tried to push past the employee, but when I finally knocked back his broad shoulders, Simon was gone. I was furious and wanted to follow him. I wasn't usually the fighting type, but I was 5'8", a few inches taller than the creep, and I was fit enough to get a good hit in. The male worker was shouting at me to get my things and just go, but a female employee intervened and attempted to pacify me. I began to cry and gave her a summary of what had happened. She was a very sweet older lady, and she held me as the others in the station continued to watch. She said I reminded her of her old college roommate, who had gone through a similar situation. The woman said her friend had not been so lucky as I was, and I should thank God that Ben was there. I agreed. The train finally arrived, and I boarded. I called Ben and recapped the episode. He sounded nervous, and offered to take off work and pick me up at the stop along the way. I hadn't seen any trace of Simon in the car, so I told him no. Not 5 minutes later, my phone buzzed again. "You're so sexy when you're scared." "Fuck off," I replied. "I like a girl with spirit. They're more fun to break." This pumped the creep factor off the scale. I called Ben, but he didn't pick up. He was probably on a delivery, so I left a voicemail to call me back. I had the overwhelming sense of fight or flight, neither of which were possible while on a 150-mile-per-hour train. When I finally got off at the station near my house, my family was huddled on the platform, talking to Ben. Confused, I stepped out to greet them. After the barrage of family bear hugs, Ben leaned in. "I called you back 5 times. When you didn't answer, I was worried," he whispered low so no one could hear. "There was no reception in the country," I explained. "Look," he said, and passed his phone to me. A text from the blocked number. I don't remember the exact words, as it was not on my phone. I don't have the exact words, but it was something about the guard dog leaving me alone all weekend, and he thought Benny would put up more of a fight. Then when I didn't answer his calls, Ben panicked and drove straight here. My parents were excited to meet him, but a little confused, as I had not mentioned him much, and I never told them about the party. Ben, of course, quickly charmed and won over the whole family. Even my dad, an ex-Marine who was the stereotypical protective father of my 16-year-old sister, and I, seemed to warm up to him. They asked him to stay the weekend, and he slept in my little brother's room. My mom and sister were both impressed with how attractive he was, and joked that I needed to keep an eye on him. Later that evening, I got another text. "You called the guard dog? You're no fun, babe." Ben held me tight to his chest and told me he was never going to leave my side. In the next few days, he kept his word. He took the week off of work and even ended up sleeping in my bed with me, rather than the living room couch I used to make him sleep on. While he was with me, the disturbing messages stopped. In class, though, and when I eventually got a job at the coffee shop on campus, I would get some like, "You look good in those jeans," or, "I love to watch you work." He knew when I was alone. They started to come so often that they started to become a normal part of my daily routine. Soon after, I had started taking self-defense classes with my campus police. I was becoming more confident that Simon was not a real physical threat anymore, as I had not seen him, and I was extremely careful to watch out for myself. But the less I cared about Simon, the more intense the messages became. I told my cop instructor about the stalker and was advised to change my number. I did, and only gave it to a few trusted friends and family. Despite my best efforts, however, the text still persisted. "You know you can't get away from me. I know where you live. I've been inside." He even described the picture of my family that I had sitting on my desk. I felt so violated and finally filled an official report to my instructor. I called in every time I received a text, but was told they couldn't do much unless he physically threatened me, which is bullshit if you ask me. I told Ben to go back to work and that I wasn't so worried anymore. He was delivering pizzas one night. Kate and the other housemates went out to a senior party off campus, and I was enjoying the quiet solitude. It was exam week, and I was up around 3 a.m. studying for the final the next day. I was starting to doze off, so I packed up the books and turned off the music. I turned the lights out and drifted off to sleep. I was awoken by the sound of crunching snow and a scraping noise on the side paneling on the outside of the house. I held my breath and slowly slid my bedside drawer open. I kept a 7-inch Marine-grade combat knife, a graduation gift from my father, in there. I used to joke about how ridiculous it was, but I appreciate his paranoia now. But when I felt around for it, it was gone. The fucker had my knife. I was so scared. I was on the edge of hyperventilating. The scratching became increasingly louder, harder, and faster. I saw the silhouette of a man through the curtain, but was too damn petrified to open them, terrified to see what was on the other side. "Go away!" My voice cracked as I screamed. I began to cry, and I hated myself for being such a coward. I tried to sound more confident as I yelled again, "Leave me the fuck alone! I'm calling the fucking cops!" I grabbed my phone and dialed 911. The operator said there was a car nearby, and they would be there in 5 minutes. I ran to check the locks on the first floor doors and windows as I stayed on the line with the operator. The noises persisted for another minute that passed like an hour. There was a deafening thud, and I shrieked. I heard sirens nearby and waited for the cops to pull into my driveway before meeting them outside. It was nearly below freezing outside, and I was still in my pajamas, shorts, and t-shirt, but I remember not even feeling the chill. I explained through sobs what had happened, and that Simon had been harassing me for months. The officers pulled me inside and told me to warm up. She said that there was another officer on the way and told me to lock up behind her as she checked the yard. The other policeman arrived, and it happened to be my self-defense trainer. He helped the woman search the area. I called Ben and left a voicemail. They returned a few minutes later and said that whoever it was had left. They followed the footsteps to the road, but couldn't find any more, as the road had been salted and plowed very recently. The two fell quiet and looked between at each other. "What is it?" I asked. It was obvious they were keeping something from me. They were silent for a moment, before my instructor told me to get dressed. I did, and we walked in silence outside. We avoided ruining the large footprints, then followed to the side. My heart dropped to my stomach, and my knees felt like jello. Under the window of my bedroom was a rushed message etched in the paneling. It said, "Lauren." The woman broke the silence and said she wasn't sure why he would leave his knife behind. Sure enough, there in the snow lay my blade. As a final "fuck you," he used my own knife. The cops waited with me until Ben came. They said they would post an officer in front for the night, and they would investigate Simon and review more in the morning. I called my housemates to let them know. A very drunk Kate answered on the 4th dial and said they would just try to stay at the house they were already at. Ben offered to let me stay over, and I grabbed the things I needed for the exam. We went to his apartment. He gave me the key to his place, and he told me he loved me for the first time. I was surprised at the timing, but after what felt like a near-death experience, I just said I loved him too. He convinced me to move in with him, and while I wasn't comfortable living with a boyfriend yet, I agreed until I found another place to live. The rest of the night was uneventful, but I still didn't sleep. I went back to Ben's after my morning exam. He was finishing up an exam himself when I got to the empty apartment. I was making a to-do list of things to move when I got a call on my cell phone. It was my instructor, and I'll never forget the conversation. "Hello?" He cut me off mid-greeting. "Are you alone?" Yes," I stuttered. "Why?" He sounded relieved. "Where are you?" "At my boyfriend's." "I need you to get out as quickly as possible," he said. "I'm on the way. Give me 10 minutes. "What's going on?" I pressed, frustrated and concerned. "His footprints. They're the same as the ones last night." In the background, I could hear him flick the sirens on. "Simon's?" I asked hopefully. "Ben's. Do you know where he is?" "Ben's?" I asked, and I almost laughed at how ridiculous it sounded. "He's probably on the way back." "Get out," he stressed. His serious tone told me that it was not some joke after all. I hopped to my feet, flung the door open, and ran straight into Ben's hard chest. I gasped and dropped the phone from my shaking hands. The cop's voice blasted from the speaker. Ben picked it up and held it to his ear. "Who is this? She'll have to call you back," he murmured, his dark eyes not breaking from mine. "Babe, what's wrong?" His tall frame blocked the doorway, and he slowly herded me back inside, turning the lock behind him. I was just, going for a walk," I whispered, barely audible. "Without a coat?" he continued, inching closer. "You'd catch a cold." His usually relaxed demeanor was now cold and predatorial. "Can I have my phone back?" He looked at the device in his hand, holding it high above his head as I tried to snatch it. "Please, Ben!" Tears welled in my eyes and my heart pounded. "You have to get it from me." He just smiled and chuckled. I jumped, but missed. He wrapped his arms around my shoulders, pressing my body to his. "I love you so much, Lauren. Do you know that?" I shuddered and nodded slowly. "And you love me too?" I nodded again, unable to speak without bursting into tears. "Say it," he growled, yanking my hair back, forcing me to face him. "I love you," I cried. "That's why you'll never leave me, right? Because I protect you. I'm the only one who can." He bent down, pressing his lips hard against mine. Adrenaline really is an amazing part of the human body. I know the self-defense classes really help, and anyone who has the opportunity to take them should. But when the situation arises when you need to make a split-second decision to save your life, your mind goes blank. I bit his lower lip, with enough force that my teeth sunk into it. Blood gushed down his chin and into my mouth as he shrieked. I took his moment of shock to knee him as hard as I could in the balls. He groaned as the air escaped his lungs. I ran past him, nearly to the door when he yanked my left arm back, wrenching it from its socket. I screamed, landing on my ass. "I did it for us," he roared, blood gurgling in his mouth. He spit and kicked me in the ribs. A sickening crack sent pain shooting up my side. "You're psychotic!" Sirens wailed in the distance, and relief washed over me. In minutes, 5 cops rushed the door, swarming in and pinning him to the floor. I remember his red, angry face looking at me as his split lips squished against the ground. I thought to the night of the party, which I felt helpless and Ben was the only one who would help. Now he was the helpless one, cuffed with an officer straddling his back. "I love you. I didn't do anything wrong. Lauren, tell them!" he shouted, between the cops and me. "I fucking love you. What are you doing? Tell them!" My instructor helped prop his head up, afraid to move me until the ambulance came, just in case I had any serious injuries. It turns out that the cops had brought Simon in earlier for questioning. He had a solid alibi, and explained that he had no idea what was going on. He said that he knew Ben was shady since his freshman year of college, when he suspected Ben of drugging and sexually abusing a friend of his. That night of the party, he saw me in bad shape and rushed to the bathroom to help me. Ben came and brutally beat him, knocking him out. He tried to warn me before. After the big scene at the party, Ben had no choice but to bring me home with my housemates. When they constantly praised him for being my hero, he decided it was the only way I would want to keep going out with him, if he was the only security I had. When the police went to talk to his employers, they said that he quit about a week before the incident at the train station. So he stalked me for months, saying he was at work when he was really outside my window, and breaking into my room when he was supposed to be at work. They found a second cell phone in his glove box with all the texts. Every time he thought I was drawing away from him, he would terrorize me to bring him back closer. He wanted me all to himself, and managed to pull me away from my friends and family, saying that they would only worry if I told them, and that they couldn't do anything anyway. I had become so isolated and dependent on him. The police went back to my house after Simon's interrogation and noticed the footprints. Ben was smart enough to change shoes, but was still the same size, which was a good 4 sizes bigger than Simon's. Not only that, but the side of my house was on a hill, and Simon's head would only come up to about an inch or 2 above the sill, unlike 6'3" Ben. Ben ended up being charged with aggressive assault, though the attempted rape charges were dropped, as there was no proof of it months later. He's now on his 3rd of a 6-year sentence. Simon moved schools, choosing to finish his senior year at a community college instead. I ended up becoming pretty close with my cop instructor, who will hopefully be my partner in the next year if I pass my police exam in the fall. I've been pondering typing this up for a few months now for fear it would stir things up. I'm a 19-year-old female, and I've had a stalker for 8 years. I don't know who he is, but he signs his letters as Mr. Sharp. The first time I remember encountering Mr. Sharp was when I was 15 years old. I was at my friend's house for her birthday party. Around the end of the party, we were all just hanging out in her basement on our cell phones, watching TV shows, etc. Just usual sleepover stuff. I got a text on my phone from an unknown number. It said something along the lines of, "Your hair looks so cute in braids." I assumed it was one of my friends at the time, but when I questioned them, they hadn't a clue what I was talking about. I later asked if maybe it was my friend's brother, but his number didn't match, and he didn't seem to know what I was talking about either. I was on edge for the rest of the night, but I just blocked the number and eventually forgot about it. Over the next few months, though, I would get an overwhelming amount of friend requests from obviously fake accounts on Facebook. The usual John Smith Google picture type deal. I blocked them all and set my Facebook so only friends of friends can friend request me. That's just when all the unknown numbers and texts began. It went from cute compliments to very uncomfortable statements. "I want to fuck you like a dirty little slut on your daddy's bed," was one I vividly remember. No one had ever said something so vile to me at that age. It scared me to the point where I had to tell my father. As much as my father cared, he's a very heavy drunk. Even at that age, I knew he couldn't do much. He got really mad, cursing this guy out and trying to call every number. But in the end, neither my father or the police could do much for a couple creepy texts. My father was working all the way in Syracuse, New York. He used to work for Electric Boat, so they would send him all over the place for months. It wasn't uncommon for me to be home alone. As well as being in high school, I worked a part-time job to pay for the things I needed as well as the bills I shared. I remember on my birthday I had gotten out of dinner at around 6 and made my way home walking by 7. When I got to the apartment, the deadbolt on the door was unlocked, but the handle was still locked. I thought that was really weird, because being as vigilant and safe as I am, I always lock both locks. I thought for a moment my dad was home, but that dwindled quickly when I saw that his car wasn't there, and he would have given me a call or something. I sort of brushed it off as me being paranoid, but I still felt uneasy. I unlocked the front door and went inside, clearing out every room with a kitchen knife in hand. I found nothing, until I got to my bedroom. On my bed, which was neatly folded, not how I left it, was a birthday card. With dread all through my body, I was quick to clear my room, making damn sure no one was about to jump out on me. When I knew I was alone, and with the knife still in hand, I picked up the card. It was just a generic one from Walmart, the kind with a dog with googly eyes. It said, "Happy birthday, Mr. Sharp." I was terrified beyond belief. I called the police and had them send out a cruiser. I gave them the rundown, but they sort of didn't take me seriously. They took the card and said they would put it in evidence, and to call them if anything else happens. I felt hopeless, and very frustrated they didn't seem to care someone had broken into my house. I left that night and spent the night at my sister's. The next day I went and changed all the locks. I wasn't too worried about the windows, seeing as my apartment was on the 2nd floor. Over the next couple of months I had a creepy feeling like I was being watched. I covered all the cameras on my phone and computer because I was scared. When I would go out with my friends or family, I would stay on my toes and scoped out every man who seemed to eye me. I would get emails, texts, Facebook messages, Instagram messages, constantly. They ranged from, "I love you," I need you. You are the golden goddess of my world. I will treat you like no man has ever treated you before. 2. You're a fucking worthless skank. Not even your own father could love you. He was very deranged and frightened the hell out of me. My last straw at that apartment was when I was in the shower after dinner. I heard banging and clattering, but at the time I was babysitting my sister's German Shepherd Bruce, so I just assumed it was him getting into something. When I got out of the bathroom, I found my dinner table was set, plates set up with food, drinks out, napkins folded, the whole 9 yards. I was honestly a bit shocked at first, but I didn't have much time to because my front door was wide open and Bruce was hightailing it into the woods. I was stuck looking for that dog for an hour. When I got home, I went through my apartment again to make sure no one was there. That night, I started to look for a new place and told my dad I needed to move out. I only gave a few specific people my address when I moved out. I really didn't want him to find me again. I moved out and into my 1 bedroom I've been in for about a year. Things were quiet for a while, until recently when I came home and found a mutilated dead squirrel tied to the handle of my moped. I've sent a picture with this email, but I don't know if it'll be able to be showed on YouTube. I called the police, but as last time, they said there was nothing they could do. So I plan to get my pistol permit in 2 weeks, and I plan to be ready for the day Mr. Sharp decides to break in when I'm home. A note from Urmaker also. I don't know if I can show it on YouTube as well, but I will make sure to put a link in the description if any of you weirdos want to see a mutilated squirrel on a moped. At least to add a little validity to their story. Note to the OP, stay safe, stay on your toes. You're doing good in your process. I wish your police didn't suck so bad. Thank you so much for sharing. I attended a liberal arts college in a historic southern city which happens to be a popular tourist attraction. My sophomore year, summer of 2007, my friends and I lived in what was dubbed the gravel pit, which was exactly that, a row of houses that sat facing each other on a gravel driveway/pit. The pit was located on kind of a sketchy street, but was located short walking distance to the main strip of bars, so it was a popular living spot for sophomores at my college. After a debauchery-filled year living there, my roommates and I all decided to move elsewhere after the year was over. Like I said, it was mostly a sophomore year hotbed. I was the last to move out during the summer of 07, and thus had to spend one last night in the house alone before moving the next day. As a quick note, I notoriously was bad at locking the front door back then. I would only think to lock the door when I was going to bed and sober, hence not a lot during sophomore year. I had a designer purse stolen upon drunkenly leaving it on the porch. I have since learned better. It was about 6 p.m. when my now former roomie and one of her best friends, Pam, called me to ask if she could stay with me at the house even though she'd technically moved out. Parking was/is a bitch in the city, and her parking permit wouldn't go into effect until the next day, so she was worried about getting towed. I enthusiastically agreed. I didn't have to spend my last night in the house alone. Yeah. Pam gets to the house around 6, and immediately locks the front door upon arriving, something I obviously had not done at this time and wouldn't have done until going to bed that night. It should be noted that my room was a first-floor bedroom with a door that led directly outside to our side porch, which was immediately accessible to anyone walking by. So we're sitting in the living room watching TV when we hear it. Someone frantically jiggling the doorknob trying to get in. Pam and I looked at each other in horror, but chalked it up to typical gravel pit shenanigans, a drunk person, etc. The only unnerving part was how insistent this person was. They must have jiggled the handle for 2 through 3 minutes. It finally stops. Pam and I look at each other in relief and proceed to finish watching TV. But then we proceed to hear the person stomp over to the side porch, aka the side of the porch that leads directly into my bedroom. Homeboy then proceeds to bang on the door outside of my bedroom, before spending another minute trying to jiggle the locked doorknob and force himself in. After several terrifying moments of this, we peek out the window to see a disheveled man with his hand in his pocket, trying with all his might to get in. As I'm frozen in fear, especially because it was an old house and his increasing force could have easily broken through the wooden door, Pam yells, "No!" The banging stops for a bit, and we think he's gone for good, until he proceeds to cross the porch again, and again proceeds to bang down the locked front door. As Pam is dialing 911, I've since realized my immediate response to danger is to freeze. Thank God for Pam. He then returns to the side door to my room and proceeds to aggressively try to force his way into my bedroom. The police show up a short time later and the man is gone. All we had was a vague description of him from when we snuck a peek from the blinds. Police found the guy was nowhere to be found. But the creepiest part is what they did find. There were chicken bones littered all over the porch and outside the porch entryway/door to my bedroom. Plus, they were scattered in the bushes outside of our place. Nothing came of it though, and the police just told us to call them if it happened again and to leave the doors locked. I constantly wonder what would have happened had Pam not stayed with me/been there. If she hadn't, my front door would have been unlocked, and Chicken Bone Man would have certainly gotten into my house to do God knows what. I've never been so grateful for Pam's parking issue that led to her staying with me, not to mention that I was moving out of that horror show the next day. I no longer reside in that city, but still make it a point to lock the door as soon as I walk in versus when I'm simply going to bed. A current harmless admirer just messaged me a few months ago, and it got me thinking about my first and hopefully last legit stalker. This was years ago. I was probably grade 10 or 11 or so, as I had just gotten my license and was learning to drive. I fancied myself an amateur photographer, so I was off by a creek one day taking pictures of ducks or whatever. A guy wanders up to me and starts asking me questions about my camera. He looked to be only a few years older than me, but I could tell he was younger brain-wise, and I was more than happy to tell him all about my fancy new DSLR. The creek was by a bridge near my house, and as me and the dude are talking, my mom drives by and spots me. She tells me that she's going to the corner store for snacks and asks if I want to get some driving practice in. I say yes, and while I'm hopping in the front seat, dude gets in the back. What? My mom thinks he's a buddy since he doesn't look much older, so she says nothing and casually chats with him as we drive. When we get to the store, he goes off a few aisles to get chips and I tell my mom, I have no fucking idea who that guy is. We aren't sure if he's violent or not, so my mom takes over driving. He hops into the car and she tells him that she will drive him back to his house. No, I'll go wherever you guys go. What? ×2. She makes up some lie about going to a family gathering out of town and drops him off where she found him. Our house was nearby, so she takes off in the opposite direction and we drive around for an hour so he doesn't know where we live. When we come back, he's nowhere to be found, so we go home. Fast forward a few days later. We're on our porch doing porch things and I spot a guy standing at the end of the street. It's too far to see if it's dude, but I mention it to my mom and we go inside. A week later, same deal. We don't call the cops because we can't tell if it's the dude, but we have a feeling. He's just standing there at the intersection. Just standing. Fast forward a week or two more later and I'm at work. I get a call from my mother. Apparently dude rang the bell and asked my grandmother if I was home. My grandmother, slightly ailed with early onset dementia, totally forgot about the creeper and said no, I'm at work, accidentally confirming that I live there. He asks where I work and thanks to early onset dementia, she forgot the name but tells him, a restaurant in the mall. Well, fuck. So I'm freaked out and telling my coworkers the story. One line cook grabs a newspaper and shows me the most wanted list. There is dude for violating probation. Line cook says that her husband went to jail with him for a bit and that he's supposedly non-violent and was in for fraud or some shit, but to be careful and get an escort to my car after shift. We show the picture around to staff, and they decide it's best for me to work in the kitchen that day as my normal grill station is literally 2 feet from the door. Not even an hour goes by and dude comes in asking for me. Now keep in mind my grandmother didn't even know where I worked, so he must have went around to every restaurant in the mall. Mine was tucked in a corner of a department store that normally only old people shop at, so I'm amazed he even knew it was there. Most people told me, "That place doesn't have a restaurant. You must be mistaken," whenever I told them where I worked, so it was pretty hidden to those 65 and younger. My coworker tells him that there's no one by my name, and he gets kind of irate and insists that I have to work there. I must have been the last one he checked. My manager hears the kerfuffle and comes out threatening security and whatnot. He leaves, and immediately I call the Crime Stoppers number. He stopped by my house one more time that day before I got off my shift, and then I never saw or heard from him again. I still don't know if he gave up or if they caught him. I had only told Crime Stoppers that he had told me that he lived in the area with his grandmother, so maybe that was enough info. Oh, I forgot to mention that although he didn't look much older, dude was in his 30s. When I was 13, my mom, my younger brother, and I were living with my mom's parents. We'd escaped my mom's seriously abusive psychopathic husband, and while living with my grandparents wasn't ideal, we needed a safe space for my mom to physically recover. My grandmother had trailers and sheds on the property that she would rent out to people who needed a cheap place to stay but had no other options, such as undocumented workers or people with criminal records. Most of them were really nice and just kept themselves to themselves. And then there was Steve. Steve started asking my mom out. She was straight with him and told him no. She was dealing with her husband's threats and had no interest in dating for the next several years. But he kept asking, then begging, then arguing. He wouldn't take no for an answer. He started following her around. We'd be at the bus stop and Steve would be watching us from across the street. We'd be getting dinner and he'd be sitting outside the diner, watching us through the window. I'd even see him following me to and from school. We stopped letting my brother walk to his school alone because Steve would follow him too. He was always around. Then he started whispering outside our bedroom windows at night. Every night for hours, the three of us would sit huddled in the dark, listening to Steve ranting and raving, begging, shouting, threatening. He would call my mom his angel, his soulmate, a whore, a tease, a demon, all while trying to peer through the blinds. He was escalating. But why didn't you call the police? You are asking yourself. Simple. Grandma made it very clear that Steve was a paying tenant, and much more valuable than her own stupid, useless daughter. If Mom cost her money, she'd throw us back on the street, which would cost her custody of my brother, and my brother would not survive his father on his own. So we were trapped. One night during his ranting, Steve had an epiphany. Of course my mom loved him too. Of course she wanted to be with him. The only thing keeping them apart were her children. They could be together once my brother and I disappeared. I can still remember how calm and sympathetic he sounded when he assured her that he'd take care of everything and that they'd be together soon. She didn't have to worry about us anymore. He'd handle getting rid of us. The next morning, Mom contacted my stepdad to ask him how to defend us physically. My stepdad, knowing my mom literally couldn't defend herself against an irritated cat, convinced my mom to tell him the problem. He told her to go home and not worry about it. He'd talk to Steve. I don't know what my stepdad said to Steve. I don't know what he did, but Steve was gone before I got home from school that day. He had only taken what he could carry and disappeared. June 14th, 2018. This has sort of been an ongoing thing for about a month, but only really escalated to creepy territory tonight. I was almost hesitant to share this here, because I truly care about the quote-unquote villain of this story. But it's recently become too much for me to hold in and keep to myself. My name is Carly, and I'm a dietary aide at a local assisted living facility. If you're not familiar with those, they're sort of the step before nursing homes. Our residents are healthy enough to live relatively independently, and we only assist them in their daily routine. The one that I work at really feels like the opposite of a nursing home. Rather than being cold and clinical, it's warm and almost feels like a lavish hotel. My job as a dietary aide is to assist in prepping food, serving food to the residents, cleaning the kitchen and dining room, etc. Think of it like being a waiter for the same group of people every day. To give you a little background, I'm a 17-year-old girl who just graduated high school and is pursuing an associate's degree in pre-med at a local college before moving away to university. I've been working at this facility around a year now, and have grown to really know pretty much all of my residents. One of these residents is Clara, who is mostly deaf, and who lives here with her 3 sisters. When I first started working there, Clara and I didn't talk much about anything beyond me bringing her drinks and taking her order. I could hardly understand anything she said anyway. However, I knew she was lonely due to the communication barrier between her and the others, so I attempted to reach out to her a little bit. I would smile and wave at her, ask her how her day was, etc. It wasn't anything I didn't do for my other residents, but it excited her immensely. Clara is a very touchy woman, and by that I mean she likes to touch those she's talking to, pat them, hug them, etc. I'm autistic, and I usually jump when touched, but for some reason she never made me uncomfortable. I took this as a good sign, and I allowed her to touch me, since I knew it was her way of showing affection since talking wasn't very easy for her. It started as pats on the back and shoulder, then it was hugs, then full-on embraces. And now she's at the point where she feels the need to kiss me over and over. This was the point when I became a bit uncomfortable with the contact, but only because I was afraid of how it might be perceived. I have short hair and an overall butchy and masculine appearance that makes many residents with memory issues believe that I'm a man. And I'm also openly a lesbian. One of my coworkers had to be physically separated from a resident who was romantically pursuing her, and I was afraid that my interactions with Clara would be seen as romantic or sexual. Just to clear things up, I'm not attracted to Clara, and I'm almost certain she's not attracted to me. She constantly assures me that she loves me and that I'm really sweet, but she's never come off as flirty or anything. After a week of this, Clara has become persistent. When she's done eating, she stands by the door as I do my dishes and simply watches me, waiting for me to come out and talk to her. In really busy times, she's waiting almost an hour for me to be free, just standing in the doorway and looking in. As I'm serving food and taking orders, she watches me. Coworkers and residents usually find it sweet or funny how she reacts, but she literally won't let me go once she's got a hold of me. She's actually a really tiny woman, but she's strangely strong, and even if she wasn't, I can't exactly push one of my residents away. So I'm pretty much forced to deal with the hugs, kisses, and assurances of her love until either I or a coworker can get it through to her that I have to get back to work. Even then, it doesn't always work since she's half deaf. She usually understands what I'm saying after a while, but whenever a coworker comes to my rescue, Clara becomes strangely hostile towards them, holding me tighter and saying she'd hold me for the rest of her life if she could. Tonight went as usual, with Clara waiting for me and attacking as soon as I stepped out of the kitchen. One of the CNAs told her that I had to get back to work, and Clara gave her literally the dirtiest, meanest look I have ever seen her give, and whispered to me that she would be back later. As a coworker and I were closing the kitchen, Clara showed back up again, just like she had promised. My coworker was getting the mop water ready in the back of the kitchen, and I had stepped out to clean the counter in the dining room when she latched on to me. "No one can bother us now," she said, and I heard it pretty clearly. "She didn't like it," she continued, most likely talking about the CNA that interrupted her. Clara embraced me, kissing me over and over and telling me how much she loved me and how she would love me the rest of her life. After about 5 minutes, I was determined to get back to work, but she hugged me tighter. Eventually, someone was trying to get a luggage cart through the dining room, so I tried to break it off and let them through, but Clara just dragged me to the other side to let them through without letting me go. It was nearly 10 more minutes until I could convince her to let me go. According to all the CNAs, all Clara talks about is me. Even when I'm off, and Clara knows I'm off, she waits for me, as though I might somehow show up. I truly do love and care about Clara, and I often wonder what made her latch on to me. I don't know if I remind her of someone from her past or if she just happens to really like me, but it's getting to the point where her life revolves around me, and she's willing to fight against anyone who gets in the way of that. It would be sweet and cute if she just happened to like me, but she can't stand to be away from me. What scares me is how she retaliates against everyone in order to be with me. My mom's theory is that Clara knows her life is coming to an end. She's at least 85 or 90, and finds some sort of comfort in me. June 16th, 2018. You know my theory about how Clara might think I'm a man? Yeah, turns out that was the case. One of the administrators at work told me to avoid Clara until they could talk to her about the situation, and as I did dishes tonight, we had the kitchen doors closed so that Clara couldn't get to me. She started banging on the door, staring in at me, when a CNA told her that she needed to leave me alone and let me do my work. Clara then said, "I want him." And the CNAs tried to explain to her that I was not only a girl, but also a minor. And this just sent Clara into a frenzy as she claimed that they were lying and that she just wanted to be with her man. She started making threats, both legal and physical, and eventually it was decided that corporate would be brought into it and decide if the best option would be kicking her out, since she technically sexually harassed a minor. I was told this by one of my coworkers who was helping to guard the door, and I was stunned, horrified, and a lot of other things I can't really describe. This whole time, all of the kissing, touching, holding, it was all sexual. All the time she had invited me into her room, it wasn't just to hang out with me. It was to have sex with me. The woman I had thought of as sort of a grandma-esque figure was sexually and romantically obsessed with me, and I can't help but feel violated. Even though she wasn't allowed to come near me, she sat by the dining room sobbing, feeling as though her only love was taken from her. It's sort of a difficult situation, since I truly do love her, but not in the way that she loves me. I know now that she's not all there in the head, and I wish I would have known this before reluctantly allowing her to kiss me on the mouth and touch me on the chest, thigh, etc. I just thought it was her strange way of expressing herself through touch, but it seems that I was simply too optimistic. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit that notification button and let YouTube know that you want to be notified when I post videos. Subscribing is not the way to go anymore, so I highly recommend you check out that notification button. Tickle it. Make it happy. Make yourself happy. Thanks, YouTube. And if you would like to help support the channel, make sure you check out. I hope everyone has a great day, and I really appreciate you checking out this video. And I will catch you in the next one. And just remember, it's always scarier if it's true.